What to do when a seller ghosts you, aka how to follow up with the seller without being an annoying a-hole. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to share with you guys here today. Let's dive in.
All right, my dear friend, I'm going to take a wild guess, and that's that you've probably been ghosted by a seller. In fact, you're probably being ghosted by a seller literally right now as we speak. I know there's probably hundreds of people that are ghosting me currently inside of our CRM. And it's kind of the bane of our existence. Like if no one ghosted us, I think our business would be 10 times as big. We do 10 times as many deals. So the question is, what do we do when sellers ghost us, right? It's an important thing to approach. Now, I'm not a sales expert. I'm not a sales coach. I'm just giving you guys my 2 cents. Like this is what we do, was what has worked for us. So take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. But I do know what people do wrong. So I know that much. Maybe I don't know the perfect solution that works every time, because obviously I still get ghosted. But what I know doesn't work is probably what you're doing and what most everyone is doing, which is really one of 2 things. One, that's just passive. Like you just fall to the wayside, you forget about the person. If they forget about you, you've forgotten about them. It's kind of this faulty belief that a lot of investors have, which is deals should be brought to me on a silver platter, or said in other words, it's the idea of just always taking the lowest hanging fruit. Anything that requires a little bit of work, I can't be bothered. So that's one side of the spectrum, right? The other side of the spectrum, if you're a little more proficient, is, we still follow up. We just don't know what the heck to say. So it's a lot of, hey, just following up. And those are probably the worst 4 words you could possibly ever say to a seller. It conveys all the wrong messages. In fact, there's a concept called power versus force that comes from a gentleman named David Hawkins. I might be saying, Sumner, how is this related? Well, I'll tell you, my dear friend. The question is, how can we come from a place of power? Right? When we come from a place of power, we're no longer needy. And on some kind of subconscious level, people want to be around people that have power and magnetism, opposed to people that have force, right? And a lot of sales looks like force. Looks like, I need to get this deal done. It's what they call commission breath, right? It's like they talk about that with realtors, right? They're so desperate to get the listing that they just wear the desperation on their sleeve, and people can feel that. And what that says in this kind of energy exchange is, I need this more than you need me. And people kind of get the heebie-jeebies about that, even if it's not a conscious thought. Sometimes it is a conscious thought. And so as much as possible, we want to kind of move up this scale. Now, I'm not saying you're getting on these calls and you're enlightened. That might be a stretch for most all of us. But, usually where we might hang out is in a place of neutrality. This feeling of my cup runneth over. I don't need this deal to survive. Even if you might need this deal to survive, you need to build the belief that you don't. Right? That there's always another opportunity right around the corner. In fact, it's probably the best strategy that I can give you is to come from a place where no matter what the world is telling you currently, no matter the feedback you're getting currently, you're good. You're good. You don't need this deal. God's got you. The universe has got you. However you want to frame it, there's more opportunity and maybe even better opportunity waiting for you right around the corner. And so we need to instill that habit or that belief in ourselves. And so perhaps it's neutrality. Perhaps it's closer to acceptance. And maybe it's just frankly love and joy. Like you're just bringing so much good contagious energy to these calls that people feel like, I just want to be around this person. Of course I'm going to work with them, right? When I started Leah and we were getting on like sales calls, that was kind of a new thing for me. Like getting on a Zoom call with people and selling, like that was kind of a foreign concept. And so without me knowing it at the time and without having some kind of high ticket info closing process, I just tried to vibrate at a high level, as cheesy as that sounds. Like to bring joy to those calls and to bring my passion to those calls and to bring excitement to those calls and let that do the talking. And the funny thing is, as I transitioned out of that, the biggest challenge is how do you instill that in others, right? Because salespeople typically are salespeople and they are used to operating in a certain way. And most salespeople live in this place of force, right? It's sign the damn thing now. Let's get the damn deal done. It could be pride. It could be anger. It could just be desire, right? And that's a very common place to hang out. There's so much desire for the end result that you're pushing people. And so the goal is to get away from that and to get as far away from that as possible. So I could give you some airy-fairy response and just leave it at this, but let's get a little more practical, a little more pragmatic. But I really can't stress enough, like this is the thing to master. A great place for you to look into is Joe Dispenza or someone in that area, someone that can show you how can we create the emotions, even if we don't have it in our physical reality today, to feel like we're living in the desired place or the desired state. So to some of you guys, that might seem a little ridiculous, but it's an important practice, I believe. So something to look into. Okay, so there's kind of 7 pieces that we use, and we use these different times. I don't have a process of do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, because great salesmen, great people that are just dealing with other people, they read the context of the room. So to try to systematize this is a fool's errand, in my opinion, because then you turn into a robot and you're no longer a human. Really, what you want to do is bring your humanity to this stuff, right? And based off of the context with the seller and your rapport with them, pick and choose what makes sense. You might use all of these. You might use one of these. It just depends on the situation with the seller. Now, one of the lowest hanging fruits that we use, actually, let me back up. Before I even touch on this, let's talk about what is the antithesis to the hey, just following up. This is an important point. So before we dive into this, let me just zoom out. If you were to do none of these 7 things and you were just to get on a call, what is the antithesis to that? Opposed to, hey, just following up. Well, I use it as a moment of serendipity. Hey, I had a note in my CRM that I've been pushing off, or a note wherever it was on my calendar that I've been kicking the can down the road. I wanted to give you a shout. I just wanted to see how you're doing. It's been on my to-do list and I've been ignoring it. Right? Coming in with a little more intentionality, where it's a little more, it feels honest. It's a little more neutral. It's like less like, hey, like, where's the contract at? I'm just following up on it. Like, let's get this thing done. Creating a little more of serendipity in that arrangement. And then also just like being honest about it too. So it's like, hey, it was in my CRM to call you. Like, I'm just being real. When it's like the, hey, just following up, it's like people are trying to mask what's really going on, but people can just feel that you're just calling them to get the deal done. It's a subtle difference, but it is an energetic shift, in my opinion, that I think people are much more receptive to, right? And that usually is exactly what it looks like. We have a note in our CRM and it says to call them, and maybe we've ignored it, maybe we haven't, but just calling that out, or calling out the fact that, hey, I was going through our sign now and I saw the contract sitting in there. Obviously, it hasn't been signed yet. So just want to touch base, want to see if you had questions that we could go through. I imagine there's a reason that it's just been sitting there pending. So if there's anything I can do to shed some light on it, let's just jump into it. Maybe you got 5 minutes, we can walk through it together. And what happens is that in most cases, like the more reps you get here, you'll recognize that you're being ghosted for a reason. Now, sometimes the reason is like you're just not that memorable. Like they're just like, I'm selling the property, something important, or our conversation or connection just wasn't that memorable, so I just kind of forgot about it. But more times than not, if you're moving into the contract phase, a lot of cases they haven't signed because they don't trust you. There's questions they don't understand. There's other offers on the table. They're trying to figure out what the best solution is for them. So sometimes like getting in front of that and just calling it out and just making yourself helpful and making it known. It's like, look at, whether you work with me or not, like I'm here. So let me be helpful. Like what are the options that you're weighing here? I imagine there's things on your plate that you're considering. Is it listing with a realtor? Is it keeping it? Your kids want it? What's going on? Like just cutting through the noise and kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve, I find plays out much better. Okay, so let's move into these 7 strategies, as it were. So the first thing is sending a loom. I'm a loom junkie. And the reason I'm a loom junkie is it allows me to show my humanity. It's going and showing face, showing that I'm a real person. I just think that puts you in such a different league compared to other land investors. Most people are so flattered by it. They've never seen anything like it. And in the process, I get to show, look at, I'm skin and flesh. I'm a real person here on the other end of this. We just don't get the same effect with phone calls. Now, you don't have to use a loom. You can send a video from your iPhone and text it to them directly. You can send them a voice memo, but I prefer video, a way to show face and a way to show them, look at, like, we put a little bit of effort into this. This is something that we take seriously, and it's something that will quickly set you apart. And I find in a lot of cases, people are so wowed by the video that they're like no longer upset about the follow-up. You know what I mean? The funny thing is, like, if you were to like use these 7 strategies, you could follow up the same frequency and people actually might be elated to hear from you, where you could follow up the same number of times through text and a phone call. And people are like, dude, screw this person. I am blocking this number. This guy is so annoying. And we could be saying a lot of the similar things too. And that's the crazy part. These are less about the messaging and just more about how we're approaching the person. That puts us in a whole entirely different category. It just has a bit of a wow factor to it. The next thing is a tool, and I didn't misspell that. It's literally what the tool is called. It's called handwritten with a Y. So it's an AI kind of custom card writing tool that like writes with handwriting that looks really pretty. It's super easy to put together. It wows, that knocks the socks off people. You can send one-off cards. I think it's like $10 or something like that. It's a great way to get in front of someone. They get sent out really quickly. It feels very nice. Alternatively, you can write a custom card, I think one thing that's cool is like get something that's relevant to them or their property. So they've got a property that's in Whitefish, Montana. Maybe on that card it's a guy fly fishing, or just something that might speak to them a little bit, something that shows, hey, I'm a real person. I acknowledge what we talked about. I know about you. I know about the property. And again, just show your humanity. Don't be that sales robot just pushing to get a contract. Don't be that person where there's just another seller in your CRM and it's just, I'm just checking this off the list and you need to sign the contract. Don't do that. Number 3 is something that people have been having insane success with, and that is Tutti Cookies. Now, Tutti Cookies, it's a funny name. It's run by Dennis Yasko's wife. A lot of real estate investors have been using them with crazy success. So sellers that ghost you, typically you want to use this as you're deeper into like the contract phase where there's a little more motivation there, or they kind of qualified themselves. But sending half a dozen or a dozen cookies, pretty much every single person that sent these things, it's like an immediate text back. Yo, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I'll talk to my family tonight about the property, things along those lines. Number 4 is one to be used sparingly. Now, if you're like deep in the contract phase and they've been going back and forth with you, you can send a notary to their house with the contract. It's pretty aggressive. Some people appreciate that. I know people that have landed the biggest deals of their life through this strategy, so don't knock it, but use it sparingly. It can definitely backfire on you. And if you use it when you're too early and people are going to say, this guy is way too forward, he's out to lunch, he hasn't even answered my questions or read my mind yet or handled my objections, as it were. So be very, very careful for this. This is for someone that I'm in deep rapport with. We've gone back and forth on the contract and they've just fallen off the face of the earth. Okay. Typically, I find that this works with like the older demographic a lot better. There's people that they have a hard time working their computer, or there's just technological challenges, where sending a notary can really just make things really easy for them. And they're just not super tech savvy and don't want to be bothered by it. But again, you got to pick and choose your battles with this one. Number 5 is content. So this is a really easy one that pretty much everyone overlooks. Now, this is a very popular strategy in like the B2B sales world. So if you're selling like enterprise software or something like that, people use this all the time, where it's like someone's in the cybersecurity space and there's like a big cybersecurity news article and they send that to the prospect of the company. Hey, Bill, I just heard about this, thought you might want to give it a read or whatever. But anything that you can glean of personal information while you're talking to sellers, like take note of that stuff. And that's really what we're doing in these early calls. It's their why. Who are they? Why do they want to sell? Why haven't they sold before? Why don't they want to sell with a realtor? How did they come to own this property? What's the backstory with it? How do they use the property? How often do they get out there? And during that process, you're going to learn so much about the person that you don't have to hunt this stuff down. But let's say they're a big Chiefs fan and whatever. I don't know if the Chiefs lost or won the Super Bowl, but whatever happened there, send them an article about it if it's relevant. Again, this has to be genuine. Don't force the matter. Now you've moved into this place of force and not power, but keep your wits about you. Keep your eyes open. There's so many opportunities to draw links for people. That's really powerful. And sometimes it's not even just like flat out content. Sometimes it's just help. It's just like you can connect the dots for someone. Hey, they need a good attorney because they're going through some other crisis or some other thing. Connect them with the attorney, or their daughter's getting married and a great drone pilot. Connect them with a drone pilot for the wedding. Like, just use your humanity a bit and keep your wits about you, so where you can connect these dots and be relevant for folks. The 6th one is a controversial one, I suppose. And you got to be very careful with this because you do need to be organized. This is for advanced land investors, but there is something to be said about giving breathing room. And that is a statement of power when you allow people to work their stuff out. Now, we're still keeping touch. We're not going blackout. We're not being negligent, but you can give some breathing room, right? You have to understand that for a lot of these people, this might be the biggest transaction they've ever taken a part of. And so it's not something that they take lightly. There can be multiple decision makers involved. And so there's a lot of opinions and a lot of back and forth. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just stay out of it a little bit, like pull back. Maybe you're calling them every week, call them every month. The funny thing that I found is that most of these sellers will sell, but not as soon as you think. It's very rare that we call someone back and they already sold the deal. I mean, it's very rare. It's happened maybe a couple dozen times in my whole career, but more times than not, we'll call the person back and they have made very little progress. But I think when you zoom out and you pull back a little bit, you're telling the person, look, I don't need this. You still check in and you're still helpful, but you're not overbearing. Like, you can definitely kill yourself with too much follow-up. This is to be used sparingly. Again, I'm not saying that you should just be negligent with your leads. We need to stay on top of them. And this is where the power of context comes into play. Understand what's going on there. Someone's got a 300-acre ranch and there's 20 grandchildren that all have a say in it, and they have a big family get together in 8 weeks. All right, call them back in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, check in, and then call them back after. But like, no need to pound the pavement before that's even happened. So read the room and figure out what's going on. The last thing is also something to be used very sparingly. And then, to me, this has to be used appropriately and it has to be real. I don't think you should just make this stuff up, but is urgency. All right. There's a time to say, look, we want to work with you, but I don't know if the stars are going to align down the road. We've got money that we're looking to exercise on a deal like this. If we want to make it work, I'm happy to do so. Otherwise, we can circle back down the line and see where we're at. These people that are in this kind of force phase, like they're always available, they're always checking in, they are so bending to the seller. There's no power there. There's no boundary there. There's no principles there. And so this can blow up in your face. Like, you can use this so incorrectly and come off so disingenuine and really peeve people, typically when you're being dishonest. So you don't want to just lean on this as a crutch, but sometimes people need to be given a small nudge to do the cliff jump into the water, right? When you can tell the person really does want to do this, but they're just having a really hard time making a decision, and you're wrapping up your acquisitions or your money's dwindling for funding deals or whatever, I would just tell them that. And it's not to say that we can't ever work together again. It might not be in the next few months. So either we jump now or we'll revisit this in 6 months and see where we're at. So the key thing here is really, again, moving from this place of power, this place of either neutrality or acceptance or hell, love and joy, if you want to go that deep. And then using the context of the seller situation and using these things kind of interchangeably where it makes sense. And on top of that, using your humanity, right? Remember the adage that sellers want to work with a business that has the speed and professionalism of a Fortune 500 company, but the rapport of working with their neighbor, right? Be a human, right? You're not a commission breath, stinky old salesperson. Okay. You gotta just be a normal person that cares, that understands the seller's got a problem. They might work with you, they might not, but you're there to provide the max utility to them. And yeah, that's it. Hope that helps, guys. Cheers.